All right, we're here for a very special video with Nathaniel Thompson from Mondo Digital. Done a bunch of commentaries as well, expert film historian, and we're here to do kind of a an oddball one from 1982, but definitely from a legendary horror kind of fantasy director and Jean Rollin. We're here to do Living Dead Girl, which is actually probably his last horror film of the 80s. And he had three other ones before this from the 80s. Kind of a weird run for him, especially where his films came from before. But yeah, I guess the plot, we'll get into it. It is the story of a recently deceased girl of 3 years. Some some guys are getting rid of some toxic waste, and they spill it, and she comes back to life as some sort of weird kind of zombie vampire creature. And she's driven by a connection with her lifetime best friend that they made a blood oath. And when that goes, when somebody's dead and you want to keep them alive, you'll do anything. So that's kind of the plot of Living Dead Girl.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, yeah, this was an interesting one because Jean Rollin had this movie sort of suckers you in a way if you're a big Euro cult watcher, because at the beginning it starts off like you said with there are these robbers kind of break in, they're gonna do some grave robbing and all that. There's what you assume it's like toxic waste, whatever that stuff is that revives her, and it almost feels like you're watching like a Eurocine movie. It feels kind of like sort of cheap and off kilter at the very beginning. And if you've seen Zombie Lake, which was he sort of was brought as a gun for hire on that one before that, it almost feels kind of Zombie Lake at the very beginning. And you think, oh, it's gonna be one of those, but then it kind of sneaks up on you. I mean, it really kind of like gets you in the heart. It's one of his most emotional films, I think.
I think so too. For people that don't know what Eurocine is, Eurocine had some really kind of real turkeys in their film library. They have a couple gems. I believe Stage Fright is a Eurocine, right?
No, that was Joe D'Amato's company.
That's Film Barrage. Eurocine had like Panther Squad.
Yeah, they did Panther Squad. They did a lot of Jess Franco films. I mean, their best film is probably Virgin Among the Living Dead. I mean, that was a kind of an accidental masterpiece. But yeah, they did Zombie Lake. I mean, they did tons of like those weird like hybrid movies, like Nazi exploitation movies, where it's like two movies smushed together. But yeah, it was run by a guy named Daniel Lesueur, but it has a very distinct aesthetic. Like if you rented a lot of Wizard Video VHSs back in the day, the big boxes, like you kind of knew what that when a Eurocine movie came on, you knew it right away. Like just the font, and they all kind of look like they were edited with Scotch tape, and they were kind of just raggedy looking. But yeah, but there's like a little bit of a Eurocine kind of trickling into this movie, but in a good way.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely more professional looking than a lot of the Eurocines. Only special kind of moron could mix up Film Mirage and Eurocine, but you have to be educated enough to even do it. You're like, what are those? But
you've done how many? We just said you've done how many 1982 movies? I mean, you've got the fact that your brain is still functioning amazes me. Like,
I don't know why it is, honestly. Like sometimes I'll watch a movie and be like, go back to talk about it. I'm like, I have to rewatch that whole movie to remember a damn thing, especially some of the Eurocine ones. If you've ever seen Panther Squad, you'll know what I'm talking about. But this opens up the geographic location where it's at. Like, to understand, the crypt is connected to possibly the sewerway systems. These guys go in there to get rid of it. They end up in like a family's crypt, and they decide, we were going to dump this toxic waste. Very Revenge of the Living Dead Girls like, which from '87, which is very similar to this movie in the weirdest way. That would be the Eurocine version of this movie. Yeah. But and they decide, let's do some grave robbery while we're at it, and they get, I guess, I think a little bit more than they deserve, but they get ripped to pieces by Françoise Blanchard. I don't know if she has a last little kind of umlaut on her last name there, but
Françoise Blanchard. But you don't have to say it that way.
There we go.
We're gonna say Catherine on this instead of Catherine, because I just don't want to keep saying that over and over again. So.
I feel like Alex Trebek when I try to overpronounce things, but then I feel also like hillbilly when I don't overpronounce them. It's like a mixture of the two. Like, do I want to be Alex Trebek or a dumb hillbilly like I am? You know what I mean? But no,
I'm going for the hillbilly pronunciation on this one. So.
So the whole thing is the fingers is such a bizarre touch. Like the Living Dead Girl uses her fingers, and it's almost like kind of it's a weird thing, like Rabid somewhat. How she had the armpit fingers, but she seems to puncture and get the blood, which makes her a strange mixture of a vampire and zombie in here.
Yeah.
If we want to talk
in Germany, it's called Lady Dracula, which is interesting. If you get the German Blu-ray that Wicked Vision put out, but yeah, it's called Lady Dracula on that one, which is so yeah, they think of it as a vampire movie over there.
It's kind of a mixture. It's kind of a weird kind of take. I would not call this a vampire movie as a whole, because the way the character is brought back to life, the way
Yeah,
the other people interact to the dead body. You know, if it was a classic Gothic style vampire film and they went to the village and they said, this girl's dead, she's a vampire, you know, she's still alive, they'd be like, oh, it's a vampire. You know, the classic
right.
little villagers would go nuts and just have the whole Dracula hammer horror kind of deal. But they don't seem to care. It seems to be set in I don't know, a zombie world, if that makes any sense, you know.
Yeah,
Even the,
and the fact that she like consumes flesh also.
yeah,
This movie is like very sort of like tactile about human bodies. Like, I mean, this is like one of those few movies where it feels like people are actually meat, like where she's eating them. I mean, it's really like visceral the way that these scenes are done. So that's why I think it's a zombie film, because it
yeah.
really lingers, especially at the end, it lingers on her, like just what she's sort of tearing these bodies apart and just really digging into the meat of their bodies. I mean, it's pretty rough stuff.
There's two scenes in where they kind of dig into the guts, and at one point you even actually see innards, which you know is a classic. Just go to the
Yeah.
butcher shop, has to be. Um, I noticed also the split second shot of the opening reminds me it's kind of going for that environmental, just a tiny bit, just a half a
Yeah.
second, just barely any explanation, but it's an explanation. You see the power plant, and these guys are driving down the road just to get rid of it. That's all as explained and everything like that, and we kind of just jump into the movie. And at first, you know, our character, our lead kind of living dead girl, she's more delirious, you know, almost like in a dream, which fits John Rollin very well. You know, it's a surreal quality. And as the more blood she gets, the more she remembers as she wanders around her old castle house, where her parents are also deceased, to understand it. It's kind of weird how it gets to it, you know, how it gets to
Yeah.
her friend, her best friend, because you're like, is she living here? Is she like hired to sell the house? But then she's not the one actually selling. We have the realtor, but they never explain she's a realtor. You know, just kind of strange things like that in aspects. Do you want to talk about the living dead girl herself?
Yeah, so Françoise Blanchard was, well, she was a fairly new actress at the time, but she's actually become quite the John Rollin champion. She worked with him again on some later projects, but she's all over the special editions of this film. She really enjoyed playing this, and but she got into the role. I think she and Marina Pierro in this film would probably get my vote. I think they're maybe the two best performances Jean Rollin ever got out of anybody. I think they're both just fantastic in very different ways, but they both go for it at the end of this film. But she is, I think, one of the most heartbreaking zombies on film, and she's not really a villain. It's a very sort of animal urge in her. But yeah, you're right. She starts off. I kind of think it's almost like this is like a pessimistic version of Poor Things, you know, where Emma Stone starts off as like the mind of a baby and she progresses and becomes more curious and enlightened. And this one, she starts off like the mind of a child, but like as she remembers things and she gets her speech and everything. But the more she gets in touch with her humanity, like the worse she feels. Like she's like, I can't do this. I want to die. But she has these urges that keep, you know, consuming her. And I think the way that Francoise brings that out of her character is really interesting. And by the end, like you really feel for her. And it's actually the Helene character who's kind of like the main villain because she's
Yeah.
dragging these poor folks in to like feed to her, you know. So it kind of feels like a Pete Walker movie, you know, when she keeps like checking these poor folks down in the catacombs to get devoured. But yeah, really interesting. And she's almost kind of like the way that she plays her. John Rollin, of course, has a very strong fairy tale feeling in a lot of his films, but she's almost like this magical creature because her fingernails kind of like come and go, like they aren't that long throughout. Like sometimes she'll lift up and it's like just more, like long nails, but not the spiky things that she digs
It's
with.
like
But like every time
canines, like a vampire's teeth, her nails.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, they protract when she gets hungry, and you know every time she kills somebody, it's like this bloodbath. There's blood spraying all everywhere, and then like it'll cut, and like an hour later, she's totally clean. You never see her bathe, you never see her clean off, but he's wearing the same dress, and she just keeps like, you know, hitting the reset button after she kills somebody, which is it's really interesting, I think.
We have a really good bathing scene though too, and I'm not trying to be like just there's a nude scene. It's just a really he what he does is he sets up really well in here. He always does the long takes. I think Grapes of Death is one of those long takes where it's literally
Yeah,
somebody walking across and it's so far away and it zooms out, and I was just my mind was blown when the first time I saw that. But the one stuff I really liked is he'll have a shot like up close with her bathing on the actual what am I looking for here? I can't believe I thought of the ledge. Why can't I not think of the word here? The not the patio, but you know what I'm saying, right? And we're far
right.
away, we don't know it. And then we zoom back, and she's just standing there, and it just puts you into like how surreal it is. Like, can you imagine this woman standing naked there, being cleaned by another woman, just staring out in the distance? And it
Yeah,
also is very similar to her taking care of her. They're very similar to the end scene, of course, right? That
yeah,
big dramatic end scene where we're close and we zoom out, and
yeah.
again, our Pierro is taking care of her in a different kind of way at that time. So
Yeah.
it's actually really smart. It's really artistic. And this one, you're right, it definitely does have the most emotional impact. There's he definitely knows how to get some emotional things out of you. He didn't write the whole movie himself, they say, but I think he wrote the main screenplay. Only other people are credited as dialogue, so I think he is pretty much solely responsible for that stuff. And he was always kind of infamous, right? Like, he didn't want gore films. He did not like gore films, and he would like kind of write them off. This is a gore film, and his most popular movies amongst the kind of genre fans would be his gore films, like Grapes of Death and Fascination, and this one because they have the most blood. But it's just how he does that shot where we have the flashbacks, and that just immediately gets to anybody, because you can, as an adult, your heart be like, but then as you go back to the childhood stuff like that, that just innocence, and the line to Stand By Me reminds me of nobody ever has friends like they did when they were a kid. God, they don't, or something like that. It's very much like that, you know. And there's also a lesbian angle here. Pierro is definitely in love, madly in love with her friend here, and just could never let her go, never got over it, which brings me, kind of reminds me of Martyrs, honestly. It's very much a Martyrs relationship here, but the villain kind of side switches here. Yeah, it does. It's almost like, but it's not, it's definitely sort of a same-sex bond between them, but like calling it lesbian almost seems kind of weird. It's almost like, I mean, there isn't a female equivalent, but it's like what you would call a bromance, but it's almost like a cismance. I don't know what it is, but it's like, it's something beyond just carnal. It's not just sexual, but it's like they're sort of these soulmates, and it's like the death has split them apart, but now they're back together again. It's like their whole like bond has just sort of become corrupted, which is an interesting idea. And they just cannot separate from each other. But yeah, it's a cool thing. It's like it's something beyond friendship. It's beyond like being romantic partners. It's something else in this movie. I don't even know if there's no term for it. I guess fate, you know, we belong together. You're right. It's not lesbian, I guess, would require, I don't know, I'm like stepping on a bunch of things here that I probably shouldn't, and I don't want to offend anybody, but you would expect sex. And if you're thinking the classic vampire movie, you're gonna, especially John Rollin vampires, you're gonna think they're gonna have sex, but they don't. And it's more of it's like almost, it's just it's weird. It seems like it's more than just friendship. It's definitely a deep love, almost like, I guess I would call it a queer relationship in some sorts, you know what I mean? Yeah. In that aspect. And Pierro's great. She's great in here too. She's just, and that there's something about a character that can literally get help from someone and then use that character to bring. I hate that in movies. Like Near Dark does it a lot, where they're like, hey, my car broke down, they kill him, or Henry. It's just the worst thing you can do to somebody is kill them while they're helping you. It's absolutely bottom of the barrel kind of stuff, like as far as a human act. And she does it a lot, but I never hate her. I never dislike her. I like the way they frame it and shoot it. You can understand why she's doing it, you know? Yeah. Well, there's that great, she's not just a plain, she's not like an evil person, because it's interesting, because Françoise Blanchard is the character. She keeps, like, multiple times she keeps saying, I'm evil in the movie. She'll say, j'ai mal, je suis mal, because I'm evil. But it's like, in Marina Pierro, she never says that. But I mean, what she does is more evil. But then there's that great moment where when she does the first feeding, where she gives the first victim, and she runs away. She slams her and she runs away, and she's running through the house, just covering her ears up because she can't hear the screaming, you know. So it's just fascinating the way that they both kind of live in this sort of denial, you know, of what they're doing. And there's only one way it can end. I mean, it's not like it's a shocker how it winds up, but still, it still kind of hits you in the gut. And I know that John Rollin is a popular person among, like, you know, a lot of horror fans, but when you hear often like newer directors, they don't really credit him, and you could clearly see like Raw, the movie Raw. Yeah, they definitely are a fan of Living Dead, that director. Oh, yeah. Also being French, there's no way. Or The Sadness, the idea that you're doing something horrible, you're actually like ripping people apart, but you're crying because you know it's awful, and that end shot is that verbatim. Yeah. And again, Martyrs, like all these movies, especially the French ones, John Rollin was what? I mean, like at the time, he was got to be like the quintessential horror director. I mean, there's the Raphael Depard. He did a couple really good ones too at the time. But when I think French, you know, I think honestly John Rollin. Yeah, I mean, he was the only guy really just regularly out there slugging away at it in France, because in France, they didn't think that homegrown horror films were worthy of attention, you know. So that's why a lot of his stuff, well, even like how many of them are actually horror films is up for debate, because a lot of his earlier vampire films aren't horrific, really. I mean, they're kind of, they have monsters in them. But like, I don't think anybody would watch Requiem for a Vampire and got scared, you know. It's like, it's not that kind of a movie. Whereas once you get to like, I think maybe, well, Demoniacs is kind of where he started to do a little bit, but like when you get to like Fascination and Grapes of Death, and especially this film, that's when he really does start to make real horror films. And it's interesting that Grapes of Death and this film are probably his two biggest box office hits, you know, which are both his zombie movies. Two of his three zombie movies were the most successful. But then he just kind of stopped after this for a long time and made these little quirky personal projects that hardly anybody saw for a long time. and he always was the type of guy that like, yeah, I'll make their zombie movie, but I'm going to just slide in like surreal imagery. And every time there is a murder, there is like a scene of like sexuality in there.
Yeah.
With the couple going back to the house, like they didn't need to be a sex scene there, but they're like, hey, let's just have sex. I'm the realtor of this house. And there's this weird kind of sex scene, almost sex scene that ends in actually one of the better shots in the film too, I think, with the woman sprawled out on top of the stairs. You know, when that's again a zoom out. I think he does those. He's brilliant at zoom outs. The zoom outs from the, you know, I know it's kind of done in a way to save money too, but it's just an effective artistic shot, especially because there's so much darkness around the kind of focus, and it works just really well. I think we should.
The zoom thing is also something he used to use a lot in his earlier films because he would always have beach scenes and he would do these great shots of like people floating in the water and he would sort of zoom out from the beach. You know, these like, especially Demoniacs does it really, really well. Or Lips of Blood, the last, you know, the ending where they drift off in the coffin into the water. But in this one, he does that, but he uses like the little reservoir thing, you know, by the house. But he does the beach. He doesn't do the beach thing. But it's kind of like he's playing with that, using the countryside in the same way. But yeah, it's very effective the way he does it.
We should mention too, I guess, you know, how he was obsessed with kind of surrealism, and a lot of his ideas. That beach he mentions, you know, coming from his childhood, and he always wanted to film there. So half of his movies took place there. It's like he's never got out of that. He's definitely an artist through and through. You know, there's no doubt. Like I don't know why I lump these three together, and I always do. Jess Franco, John Rollin, and Joe D'Amato. I always do, because I feel like these guys were just like, they couldn't stop. Like no matter what was happening, they were never going to stop making movies, whether it was for artistic or just as all they knew. And like they literally worked until they died.
Yeah.
They were trying to work on until they
I would add Fulci to that too as well. Like there were guys who, like, no matter how much money you stripped away from them, it's like you could always tell who's behind the camera. Like there was no mistake. You could feel that personality just like soaking through it, right into the movie, no matter what it was.
Unless Jess Franco, of course, got in front of the camera, and then we have all different sorts of things going on. I do want to mention Françoise Blanchard. She's in a couple kind of exploitation movies I think people will kind of remember. From '81, she's in Caligula and Messalina, which is a ridiculous movie by Bruno Mattei, and kind of the semi-sequel Nero, which is even more ridiculous than Caligula and Messalina. I actually enjoyed Nero more, and I know it's probably just because it's more ridiculous and trashy. And if we're doing crappy Caligula ripoffs, the stupider the better for me, honestly.
Yeah.
What else? She worked with Franco in House of the Usher, Revenge of the House of the Usher, and that's like a semi-Orloff. I don't know if it counts technically as an Orloff movie. Right?
Depends which version you watch, yeah, because that was one that was never technically finished, but or now I guess it's called Neurosis. That's what it's called on Blu-ray. But yeah, that's a weird one because it's like there is no real director's cut. They've tried to get as close as they can, but yeah, like some of it has like the Orloff footage shoved into it, and it turns into an Orloff story or not. It's yeah, that's a whole patchwork, and thank God you're not doing an episode on that one because that would like give people an aneurysm. So yeah,
I actually don't think I've seen it. I've seen the one from '84, which is basically a remake of the first Orloff, which it's not quite as good as the original Orloff. And then she came back for his second to last movie in 2007, what Night of the Clocks is roughly translated to, which I've actually never seen his latter day. He made one in 2007 and one in 2009 before his death in 2010. So how are his latter day films, John Rollin?
They're interesting. I mean, they're very cheaply made, but they're still his. I mean, they're very sort of poetic and dreamlike. I don't know why it's that and Mask of the Medusa for some reason. They're both like really hard to see. I'm not sure why that is. Hopefully Indicator will dig those up. I don't know how far they're going to dig into his filmography because I know Indicator has a ton of these that they're doing. They've been doing these UHD editions. I would imagine even stuff like Killing Car and Sidewalks of Bangkok are probably higher on the list than those are, but you never know. But they're pretty good to watch. And yeah, it's fun seeing her pop up again with him. And I'm actually sad he didn't do another one with Marina Pierro because I think she's great too. I wish they'd done another movie together.
He did comment that he wasn't really the biggest fan of her. It saw like some like off thing like that. Like I don't know if she was full of herself or not, but she's a super iconic looking actress. I know her from, of course, probably her biggest film for me, at least, is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Miss Osborne, which is a really good movie by Valerian Morlicek, or however his name is always giving me trouble for the check. But that's a great movie, fantastic movie, and she's got the contacts in that film. If you've ever seen stills from it, she's got the piercing red eyes, just haunting stuff. Great movie. and she's really good in that as well. And I know she had a pretty decent career. I know she got started in a lot of the actresses and actors, especially the actresses. It seems like a lot of pretty actresses got their starts in a lot of the kind of big Italian, like mainstream directors like Visconti and stuff, and that's where she got her start at. You always hear a lot of the stories from like the actresses that end up in some B stuff. They always were like, "Oh, I got my first role in a Fellini movie, and I was in the background," and that's just pretty much
Yeah.
how everybody got started in that aspect. I'm sure you could add more detail about that.
Yeah, so her first role was in The Innocent, which was the last film directed by Visconti, where she plays Jennifer O'Neill's friend in that. Uh, Supposedly she's an extra in Suspiria. Like honestly, there's so many schoolgirls running around. I've never been able to spot her.
I can spot her. I would remember
Yeah,
her too.
yeah. I mean, I think you think she would jump out. I've seen Suspiria like a jillion times. I've never been able to see her, even in 4K. Like I've never been able to spot her. So if someone could send a screen grab in and point her out, because I've never been able to figure out if she's in there. But legend has it she's in there somewhere. But yeah, but Borovchik was really kind of her creative soulmate. I mean, she like talked him up like forever, just that he was the one who really brought the real actor out of her. Um, and yeah, this was her only Rollin film. I interviewed Jean Rollin back in 2001, and he always I mean, he loved her performance, but he just called her a strong personality, which I guess is director speak for she was kind of a handful. So, but whatever that relationship was, he brought something amazing out of her. I mean, she really goes for broke at the end, and I mean, she can go just nuts on camera, I think, as well as anybody. I mean, maybe not quite Isabella Johnny Possession level, but she's pretty close. Like if you watch Dr. Jekyll and Miss Osborne, I mean, that ending is just wild. Like the last 20 minutes of that is just this frenzy, where she just goes nuts. It's really something else, and she does it in this one too. I mean, the scene where she's got the woman captive and like where she's cutting her abdomen, just really going crazy. She's just a really powerful actress, and yeah, it's a shame she doesn't tend to get thought of as like a Eurocult icon as much as she probably should. But at least Borovchik fans love her because she did a ton of films for him.
Yeah, and that movie Osborne could definitely give John Rollin a run for his surrealistic money. That's a fucking nightmare and a half if you've ever seen that one. But almost sillier. I would say there's a comedy element to some of the characters for sure in that. Like when you get to Patrick McGee, he's pretty ridiculous in that film. So a couple other things. I think we should probably mention the American version of this movie, which was never released and lost, from my understanding. I couldn't find anything on it except the director was Gregory Heller, and they told a very funny story about how he basically would just badmouth John Rollin, like he doesn't know what he's doing, but nobody knows who the fuck Gregory Heller is. He wrote Alphabet City and this, and for dialogue or something, and he's probably worked bit pieces his whole career and nothing ever credited, but no one knows who he is. So everybody knows who John Rollin is for the most part if you're a major horror fan. So
yeah, I can't imagine I mean, I don't even think it was ever edited. Like I think they just shot it and it just nothing ever came of it, probably because they realized what a train wreck it was. Because if you think about it, they were trying to do this kind of like 1931 Dracula, where they shot the English language one during the day and they brought in, the Spanish speaking actors at night and shot on the same sets. But in this case, I mean, you've got these actors set up, and then you suddenly do the take again with them in English. But like the problem is, this is a bilingual movie anyway. There's a whole subplot, with the Barbara character, which is done with an English-speaking Canadian actress who they sort of going out of English and French. But doing the whole thing English, most of your actors don't really speak English, so you're going to wind up with very sort of thick, insufferable accents. So what was the point? I mean, it just had to turn out to be just a total nightmare. I can't even imagine what a mess that footage was.
And also, if you're shooting back to back, they had to have 2 or 3, 4 different wardrobes changes with all the blood and everything, and it just doesn't seem very likely because a lot of these people, like you said, didn't speak different languages. And in the beginning, when I was reading, there was an American version, they shot it in English. When they cover their mouths, I was like, that's why their mouths are covered, I bet. Like the longer their mouths are covered, the easier it is for them to possibly ADR this and everything like that.
Yeah.
I think we should mention, Carina Barone? I would say Barone or Barone. It depends. I don't know her pronunciation. I've heard that last name pronounced both ways. She's pretty decent in this, I'd say. Her subplot's a little strange and definitely takes away from the story you want to see, but I don't know if it's filler. But her whole story ends where it's really kind of dark. She leads up and you think she's going to do something. And when she actually gets the fire in the face, you're like, oh, shit, that's the end of her?
Well, then you get that amazing fire gag where she's running outside across the little bridge on fire. I'm like, oh my God, like that stunt person was insane. Like, because I mean, they're really engulfed and jumping in the water and she's screaming and screaming. That's a crazy gag. It kind of reminds me of, in Jose Larraz's Vampires, because you have the whole subplot with the couple in the camper. They keeps cutting back to you over and over, and you think, oh, it's going to be they're going to save the day, or it's going to wind up tying it. And then, like, at the end, it's like, sorry, spoiler. And it's like, nope, they're dead.
Yeah.
You're like, okay. So, or like the Ogilvy character in The Stepfather, you have these subplots where you think, oh, this person's going to come and save, at the last minute, they're going to come in and save everything. And then, like, sorry, nope. Like,
movie this year that did it is The Heretic, or last year. You're just like, okay,
yeah.
we got that. It's just like it's just to throw you off.
Yeah.
A couple of happens, a couple times. The fire stuff was kind of similar to The Phenomenon, where he just runs and jumps in the water, the little guy.
Yeah.
That seems great. The character who plays Mike Marshall, like, he had some major credits, worked up right to his death. Moonraker is probably the big one, the Bond film.
Yeah.
So, but besides that, I do not know this guy from all the works he's in and everything like that. He's not a familiar face to me.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, and again, it's like they just sort of, like, I think they just cast actors who could speak some English and French, which is why their conversations are sort of awkward, because, like, they'll be sort of delivering their lines in English to each other, like when they're in the pub or whatever, the restaurant or whatever, and they're sort of switching back and forth. I think that's why they were hired. And again, because again, she was Canadian, so she could jump back and forth between French and English. So, it's a little clunky. I would say it's not Jean Rollin's finest dialogue, but they probably brought somebody else in to write that, because Jean Rollin's English was not the greatest as well. And by the way, you can see Jean in the film, literally at the exact halfway point. There's that great scene where Barbara's walking through the outdoor market, and Jean Rollin is like the vendor, talking to her, and he walks off. He pulls out this huge pipe and he kind of walks off screen. It's a nice little touch there. I always love seeing him pop up in his movies.
I love actually hearing him talk at the Fantasia Film Festival. He was no ego
Yeah.
at all,
So
and he just
so sweet, such a nice guy.
seemed like such an intelligent guy that understood. There's nothing, I hate to do it, there's nothing worse than a director who doesn't understand his own, what people, how they value or evaluate their work. They're just like, well, like Fragazzo, he's like the big infamous one. But I don't like seeing that, because then the people are like trying to make a joke of somebody, but they don't even make movies, and they never made a movie in their fucking life. So it's always it's an ugly situation for me. So like, to see how he was, like, they asked him the question about people laughing, and he's like, well, that's just, that's just how it is. Some people are not used to this sort of thing, or it's an old film, they don't get it and they don't understand it. And he was just like, wow, that was so well handled. And he just seemed so genuinely happy to talk to people, and just seemed like a really relaxed, intelligent guy.
Yeah, I think he was just sort of surprised that he became beloved among film fans, because he wasn't somebody like he wasn't really on my radar, I think, until there was a book it was either called the Phil Hardy Encyclopedia of the Horror Film or the Arm Encyclopedia. It has several different names, but that had, like, really extensive write-ups, in English about his films. And I had seen stills in some vampire books, but, like, his actual name didn't really mean that much to me as a kid until I was reading that. I was probably like maybe 12 when I read it, but I was like, God, I want to see these movies, and the only one you could see was Requiem for a Vampire, which was called Caged Virgins, when something weird put the tape out, But Living Dead Girl, luckily, that popped up pretty early on British tape. It was cut a little bit. There was some slight gore cuts to it, but Redemption put that on tape. So that was one of the earlier Rollins that I actually got my hands on from a gray market dealer. But yeah, it's like once people started seeing them, it's like all of a sudden he had all these English speaking, like Fulci, like all of a sudden they had all these English speaking fans, and like Franco, people really wanted more of this stuff, because it had always been mishandled over here. And like once you realized, oh, there was this like creative force behind these movies, these weren't junk at all, like a lot of critics thought they were. And I think he was really, he seemed very flattered that anybody would sort of give him the time of day, because in France it was like, oh, a lot of films didn't make any money. He lost a lot of his personal finances he put into these. He had to go off and do, a lot of porn films that his heart wasn't in. So yeah, I'm just glad that he lived long enough to see himself vindicated.
Well, and when I first was coming up watching a lot of these movies, I watched horror films, 4 or 5 years old, but you don't start paying attention to who people are until you're like 9 or 10, and you start seeing like, oh, it's George Romero, John Carpenter, Wes Craven. And then you start to get like to the books, the big books and stuff, and then eventually the online would come, and you'd see all these bootleg sites, and you start seeing names like Jess Franco or John Rollin and Joe D'Amato. So you're like, okay, I'll find Oasis of the Zombies, I'll find the Grim Reaper, I'll find Zombie Lake, and then you watch them, and they're either cut versions or the worst movies they ever did, and they're just made. They got hired, and they were low budget. They just did it for money, and so they come synonymous with crap. Like you think those names, you're like, oh, fuck that, I'm not getting their movies, because you see their worst movies first. And I think that sometimes John Rollin was lumped in with just Franco's worst films. along the same way. So my first experience was Zombie Lake, of course, and just all zombie all day, anything in the video store with zombies, I'd rent it. That the opening scene at 12, 13 years old with the underwater stuff is just like, oh shit, just shocked, honestly taken back, like, but yeah, that was just my first experience with it, and I thought it was terrible. I thought it was a horrible movie. Now I look at it in a completely different light, and I find it enjoyable and just kind of funny and goofy and not that bad, honestly. Although, started as you could tell it started as a Just Franco movie, and he said, I don't want to fucking do this. Give it to John Rollin. That's just funny to me. It's like, and then just packed in as much nudity as possible in the movie.
Yeah, it's I think for a lot of us, Zombie Lake was kind of an initial one that we got into, but Franco and Rollin kind of they sort of went hand in hand career-wise in some other ways. Like one thing that was very confusing was back in the day, there was the version of Virgin on the Living Dead that a lot of us could see on tape was actually one that Jean Rollin had gone back and shot some zombie scenes for. Kind of around the time he was doing Zombie Lake, they did these inserts, these horrible zombie inserts that they stuck in there. So a lot of people thought that Virgin was credited as a Jean Rollin film in some reference books as well, so which it sort of was, depending which version you saw. So yeah, there's kind of like this fuzzy line between the two of them.
I guess I want to mention the special effects artists. That's why they're so they're primitive. I would say primitive, but somewhat effective here. Benoit Lestang, who died in 2008, and he's all over the Blu-ray special features. The story they tell is really nice because he comes back in 2007. The Fantasia to introduce one of his earlier works, and a year later he was dead. But this was his first kind of start. He was in high school at the time working on special effects, so it's just like a nice little story that John Rollin would give him the chance, probably due to budget as well. And he's very critical of his own work in it, but he would go on to work in stuff like Martyrs and Brotherhood of the Wolf and Baby Blood, Brain Damage. A lot of classic movies, especially those big French movies, and practical makeup effects and a lot of stuff too. And I don't know how he actually died in 2008, but he was fairly young at the time.
Yeah, that was a shame. And his work on this film is interesting because some of it is incredibly effective. Like there's some shots where you're like, wow, that's really good. And there are other shots, especially once you watch it on Blu-ray, like when it's pretty unforgiving. When they get to the UHD of this, or as we're recording this, it hasn't come out yet. I assume indicators go to it. But 4K is going to be an issue in a few shots of this movie.
The face shot.
Pretty much
the skinny shot. That looks bad now, honestly. That's the one shot where I was like,
yeah, the bit with the boyfriend stealing back in with the mask on, and also, there's bits you can sort of see where the latex is. You can see, well, even if you look closely when Marina Pierro, where she's getting her neck eaten at the end, you can sort of see where the white appliance is on her neck. A couple of shots. It's not a big deal. I think it's kind of neat when you can sort of see the trickery involved with it. It's kind of fun. But yeah, there are definitely some flubs. If you're looking for a movie that's technically perfect, Jean Rollin's probably not the guy for you, nor is Franco for that matter. But and there's some, and also now we've got an HT, for example. I never noticed until the Blu-ray came out, but like when she's dragging the boyfriend into the catacombs or whatever, but you can actually, he's covered in blood, but you can actually see him blinking, when she's dragging him on the ground, he's like, playing dead.
You see,
just stuff like that. It's kind of charming though. It doesn't bother me.
You see Pierro blink once too, but she could still be alive when she's getting.
Yeah, I think she's dying. I give that one some slack if you don't know.
Yeah. But that scene is just one of the best scenes in the 1982 to me. The zoom out, and the first time I saw this movie, I was actually taken back how emotional. The core was the emotion. It wasn't the gore that brought me in. It was the relationship between the two and what this person was willing to do for their friendship. And it's like a weird kind of element here. Like, if my friend is dead, I want to be dead. And if I can't bring her back, I'd rather be dead myself or sacrifice myself to bring her life. It's just a really emotional kind of roller coaster there. And the cuts between the music box is probably the centerpiece. You get that little music motif and it plays all the time. And that's just really effective too.
Yeah, and the fact that she's in denial, that Helena's in denial about her friend, because Catherine keeps saying, "You don't understand me. You don't know what I am. Like, she keeps saying, I'm dead, and she's like, nope, I'm going to make you better. I'm going to make you better. Which is how that's kind of human nature. It's like when you're confronted with something that's that horrific. Like it's no, you're in front of me. You're alive and you're my friend. So I'm going to make you better no matter what. That's what's so tragic about it. It's like that. You know that this can't possibly end well. But she just keeps trying and trying.
It's strange that she's been dead for like 3 years, but she must be preserved. I'm wondering if they were putting that toxic waste down there for years. It looked like
apparently,
it was building up and everything like that, which is really messed up back in the day because it's just a crypt underneath the house, which is really haunting. I don't think I'd want my family members buried underneath me.
Thank you.
The movie's very like it has a gothic look, but it doesn't play gothic. Like the villagers seem gothic, but when you go to the village, it looks almost like your little like almost like a Texas dance off. They're just like
Yeah.
old and young dancing together, and it doesn't seem like your typical gothic world. Yet it looks like they're in a gothic world with the village, the landscape, and the kind of countryside, and then the castle itself. But it is in a modern world.
Yeah, I love all the stuff, all the provincial sort of day-to-day life stuff in this movie. I think adds a lot to it. I love when the camera sort of drifts off and suddenly we're hanging out again at that market, or yeah, we're having a little night fest where everybody's together and they're dancing and the band is up there playing and all that stuff. And there's that great moment. I love the moment where you get the wide shot and like you just see the couple dancing up in the window above everybody else when they're all dancing together.
Yeah,
And
that's
just little
cute.
touches like that. It's just really nice.
And I also like the idea of snapping a photo of someone and becoming completely obsessed with it. Because that's what
Yeah.
happens. Is she snaps a photo of the living dead girl and she's like, "Who's this? She's beautiful. I want to find out who she is." And everybody's like, "Yeah, she's dead." It's very Let Sleeping Corpses Lie, right? Where
Yeah.
the guy drowned. And that's actually
Yeah.
I love Let Sleeping Corpses. I think that's such a nice touch where he's like, "Oh, he drowned. That guy's dead." And it's like
Yeah.
kind of haunting stuff right there. It's kind of similar to that. It has a lot of style of other movies that came before it, but I do think this was a pretty influential movie. Like I think Raw and Martyrs and those movies and Revenge of the Living Dead Girls are directly inspired by The Living Dead Girl.
Oh, for sure. I think French horror in general, I think goes a lot, especially like the whole like the new French extremity movement. I mean, you can definitely feel Jean Rollin kind of having a hand in that. And as you said, I don't know that he was necessarily opposed to gore in and of itself, but he didn't like gore for its own sake, just splashing it around because that was really becoming a thing around this time where it's just gore, 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 gore. But he wanted to have some kind of emotional heft to it. So that's why in Grapes of Death, he really appreciated that people like the fact that, you have people being stabbed at, but they're sad about it. People are crying when they're killing somebody or being killed. They're saying, I love you, like, that's very Jean Rollin. But he wanted to have like some purpose to it. Which again, I think that Grapes of Death and this one are probably the bloodiest films, Fascination being probably number three. But all those, I think, just have a real kind of like strong emotional core to them.
I think that's more effective for me. I never was like I don't care if a movie has extreme content in it, as long as the story's told well or it pertains to the movie. Every once in a while, I like just watching a gore fest for a gore fest, but the ones that you come back to multiple times usually have a story, and the reason the gore, the extreme factors in there is due to the storyline.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, for sure. Who am I looking for? He used the DP and the editor were typical people that he used on the movies, and I don't notice anything that looks too different, especially if you compare like Grapes of Death. I think looks like this or Night of the Hunted. Although I think Night of the Hunted, from my memory, looks more polished than Living Dead
Yeah.
Girl, at least brighter lit, probably more money involved.
Well, totally different environment. Because Night of the Hunted is set in a city. I mean, that one, because Grapes of
Yeah,
Death and this one take place in the countryside. They're out in the provinces, but Night of the Hunted is very modern. It's almost like it's like his Tenebrae. It's all these very sort of like spare, angular buildings. Like there's not much interior decoration. It's very cold. I mean, that's a sci-fi movie basically.
yeah,
But again, it also has a great ending though. It has another one that's really sad, kind of like haunting endings, which he was really getting good at.
yeah. He's
You'll
great
notice
at
like in his early films, he didn't quite stick. Not this is not necessarily a flaw, but like when in his earlier films, he didn't quite come up with these sort of endings that kind of stick with you. But later on, you kind of figure out how to do it. I think again, Demoniacs onward, you could feel him sort of playing with it in Lips of Blood, but especially these later films, he really knew how to like deliver an ending that would just like lodge in your head. Because like Fascination, Grapes of Death, this one, Night of the Hunted, like just really fantastic, fantastic endings.
that. Escapees has a really downbeat
Yeah,
ending too from '81,
yeah.
and if I'm not mistaken, Night of the Hunted kind of ends in a visual shot that's reminiscent of Rabbit or Night of the Living Dead, right? Something like that.
Well, it's where they're just stumbling down the tracks, where they're
Yeah,
dying and they're walking hand in hand down the tracks
yeah,
at the
yeah,
end.
yeah.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
reminds me somewhere like that. I knew that. Overall, I think this is actually one of my favorites in 1982, and it's so different from anything else from 1982. And it's the last horror film he did in the 80s, and it's one of his last horror films for a very long time. And I know it's weird to say, but I would have liked to see him do 5 or 6 more in the 80s because I think he kind of peaks out here with a lot of his stumps, a lot of the stuff mixing, I guess, commercial. Because
yeah.
a lot of the stuff's not commercial for most people. It's like a commercial mixture of art and commercial, and I think that's kind of like a lot of the directors hit their high points when they're kind of mixing those two.
Yeah, it's a shame because yeah, I mean we're talking like this is 82. He didn't do another horror. I mean his next horror film was like well in 95 he shot Dwarf Vampires which came out in 97. I mean that's an incredibly long period for someone who used to be that prolific. And between that, I mean, again, you get like Lost in New York, I mean, stuff like that, where you're like, okay, I mean, it's nice, but we we wanted horror movies, and yeah, I kind of wish he had kind of like buckled down a little more, especially that this actually was one of his few that really made a decent profit. It's a shame that he didn't have more opportunities to do it. But again, the market was changing. I mean, what happened in Italian cinema around this, after this. So France was kind of like that as well. It's like, where are you going to release it? Where's it going to go?
How do his shot on video movies compare to Jess Franco's shot on video movies?
Much better. I am not a fan of the Jess Franco one-shot productions era. That's there's some interesting ideas, but it's kind of like when Ken Russell switched over to shooting on a camcorder at the end. It's like, I don't care how brilliant you are. It's like, this just isn't going to work. Like, it just looks really bad.
I think I can't remember which one I saw of Jess Franco, and I was just astounded how bad it was. Like, because I mean, even when his movies were bad in terms of like story or budget, they were shot really well, and he had a good location. And when that's gone, and he still has to deal with the cheap budget, I was like, guys, I can watch Lina Romain naked just as much as the next guy, but this is all this is at this point.
Lena Romain naked in front of a VHS camcorder is not good. Not at all. It's not flattering.
Where would you rank this in terms of your favorites from Jean Rollin?
It's definitely a sentimental favorite of mine. I mean, it's definitely in the top five. It's tough because I mean his stuff is so different. Like the vampire films are kind of their own thing. But like I'm a huge fan of Lips of Blood and Requiem. I love and Fascination. I think are just fabulous. But this is definitely way up there. It's probably like maybe like two or three. Lips and Fascination kind of like duke it out for my top spot, I think. But yeah, there's some really great ones up there. And Demoniacs I think is fabulous. Those would be probably the real cream of the crop for me. But there aren't really any that I don't like, so it's kind of tough. But yeah, it's definitely in the upper tier. And I think this is a great gateway film. Like if you've never seen a Jean Rollin film before, this and Grapes of Death and Fascination, those are probably like any of those three are really good for a newcomer because they have enough of like a traditional story that you can latch onto it, and they move at a solid pace. I mean, something like The Iron Rose, I think, would turn you off like right away. It's an amazing movie, but like
I think I saw that one early, and I was like, is that the one where like it's basically just like he has a dream and then he's with the woman and they're walking for a long period of time?
It's one that's in the graveyards. Yeah, the couple go in the graveyard and they spend the night in the graveyard and they kind of go crazy and she kills him and but it's mainly just it's just her in a graveyard for 90 minutes and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful film, but like if that's one of your first Rollins, you're just gonna be like, I'm done. I can't do this.
So I'm thinking, why don't we do this? This is a little bit different. I don't want to spoil your 82 list, but you pick which director you like better.
Oh God. Okay, this is gonna be brutal.
Jean Rollin versus Joe D'Amato.
Oh, come on. Wow. That's tough. I think Jean Rollin is a better director, so I would give him the edge, but Joe D'Amato is more fun to me. Like I probably go back and watch his stuff more. It's so I'm gonna go Rollin with a big asterisk next to it.
Joe D'Amato has my favorite, like, it's not really a quote, they're asking him questions, and it's like this, it's that one like real long, hour-long interview he did or something, and he doesn't have much because he died pretty young before they were like recording a lot of the interviews and stuff on video. And they're like, what's your biggest flaw? He says, my modesty. He's like, what's your biggest attribute? My modesty. And he answers the same way, and he's got like a little cheeky smile on there. And I think that kind of sums him up in terms of how he was appreciated and not appreciated at the same time. I mean, we got to go Jess Franco.
Franco. Yeah, I love Franco. And he's someone Jean Rollin, I think I love his stuff, but I think I got a grasp on it pretty early on, and I watched a little bit. But like Franco is someone who always keeps surprising me. Like to this day, there's like some of his stuff that comes out, like there's still parts of his personality and his mind that I still haven't quite discovered yet. I mean, all these movies are still coming out. Like he's the gift that keeps on giving. So I he's probably the one that I like dive into more than Miranda. I think right now.
And Franco's got a huge like personality. He's like iconic in himself, right? Like even at his last days when he has the cigarette and the two teeth, I'm just like, I know it sounds bad, but I love Jess Franco more than I love some of his movies. And I love a lot of his movies, but watching Jess Franco made me want to talk about movies more than make movies, because money's going to run out and you're just going to end up with two teeth, smoking a cigarette, with nothing. And that's the price to pay for a real artist, and I don't want to pay it.
And then you wind up in a hotel room with a camcorder filming Michelle Bauer, and that's where you end up. So
that you know what, that cancels it out. It's worth it.
Yeah.
At least they weren't filming Chick Boxer.
That's true.
I'm not going to go on a diatribe about Chick Boxer, but Valerian, Born with a Check.
Oh, ooh. Jean Rollin, I think. Overall, but Borovchik is pretty amazing. That's a really close one.
So I think I've always seen Labete, and I've seen, of course, Osborne. I might have seen another one. I don't know if I've watched Immoral Women or not. I think it's an anthology somewhere.
Yeah. Immoral Tales, Behind Convent Walls.
Immoral Tales, yeah. Which Pierro's in Behind Convent Walls. Yeah. That was her first time working with him. So.
Yeah, she's another really good one called Art of Love, which it hasn't made it past DVD. Severn did the DVD way back in the day, but yeah. He's another one who a lot of his work needs an upgrade. So I think once more of his stuff hits hitting Blu-ray, and I go back and like marathon through him again, I might change my mind. But yeah, I love him too.
That's one thing that drives me crazy is that people only watch new movies. Like they watch the new releases of the new movies, and they never like. You got to dig sometimes yourself. You got to just look for yourself, you know.
Yeah.
Paul Nash.
I hope all these Jean Rollin films coming out that Indicator's doing, I hope he's getting a new audience. I mean, I assume they're selling well because they're still doing them, but I hope that like in the US and UK he's getting some new fans, because watching them this way is just like an eye opener. I mean, the quality on these is staggering, even compared to the old Kino Blu-rays. They still had a lot of scuffs and scrapes on their kind of Pete Walkers. I mean, they look clear and the colors are pretty good, but there's still a lot of work to do. But seeing them like this, I mean, it's like watching an opening day. I mean, it's just stunning. So I've really enjoyed like sort of watching the rehabilitation of some of his films so far that we've had, and I can't wait till Living Dead Girl comes out. It should look amazing too.
I had a reevaluation of Lamberto Bava because I love Demons 1 and 2. I love them. Yeah. Like I love those movies, and I always was like, Blade in the Dark's fine. Macabre, I was like, I'm okay with it. Blast Fighter, I don't love Blast Fighter. It's fine. Devilfish is what it is. And then I've seen some other ones like Graveyard Disturbance, and I was like that, but I was like, that's like a fun kids movie. So I was like, I don't know. I always was like in the camp where it sounds stupid and I have no proof of it, but I was like, I feel like Dario Argento like ghost directed Demons, but that's complete horseshit. And then I was watching Delirium, and I was like, I was like, that's pretty brightly colorful and weird, and I could see it. And then I watched The Mask of Satan, which is one that I've been meaning to see a good release, and I completely changed my attitude. I was like, this is a lot like Demons.
Yeah.
It's
definitely him. Well, yeah, and he does that whole like the whole meta filmmaking thing way more than Argento does. Which is Demons is all about that. But yeah, like in Delirium, it's all about the photography and versus real life, and he does it again, in some of his TV movies as well, which are finally getting good releases. That's something he plays with. Something like Prince of Terror is all about that. It's about a horror director, and someone breaks into his house and tries to like scare him with all the deleted scenes that he rejected from his scripts, which is a cool idea. That's very Demons. So yeah, no question. It's definitely Lamberto, and I think he's very underrated still to this day. I don't think he's gotten the credit he deserves.
I guess let's just do Lamberto Bava then, first Jean Rollin.
Still Jean Rollin, but Lamberto Bava is closer than most people would think. I would say it's
Paul Naschy.
Ooh, wow. Oh, yikes. Boy, Jean Rollin is a better filmmaker, but Naschy delivers the popcorn fun a lot more. So that depends on your mood, but boy, Naschy really scratches that itch when you have it, though. I don't know. That's a tough one. Barely Rollin, I would say.
Okay. And last, let's do Fulci.
Fulci. Oh, easy.
Yeah. I was going to say, I was going to stop the recording right now. Just
not even close. That's a no-brainer.
Fulci gets better every time I watch a Fulci movie. It gets better. I always felt like the true directors, the best, get better with age. Like every time you watch them, they get better, and you're just like, that's interesting. They were way ahead on that. They were way ahead on that. Way ahead on this. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. What about you? What about you and like D'Amato and Rollin? Like, where do you fall on that one?
Man, that's tough. He's got better movies. I think Jean Rollin's probably the best director of the bunch in terms of just like with what he had. Joe D'Amato's movies he shoots them really well, even though they're cheap too.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Joe D'Amato's got some really bad movies. So is Jess Franco, like bad.
Yeah.
but I don't know if it's their fault at the same time.
Well, the funny thing is Joe D'Amato and Rollin both kind of paid the bills by doing porn, although D'Amato did it
Yeah.
later in his career. That's kind of how he wrapped up his career later on. But I think Sean Rollin's porn is much better than Joe D'Amato's. I think his stuff is, again, D'Amato's were shot on video, and they have their fans because he did all these literary ones with like Romeo and Juliet and Hamlet and all this kind of stuff. But like, I mean, they're so bad. They're just, like, I don't.
That's not my thing. Like, if the porn's not shot on film, I'm not watching it.
Yeah, I've tried them. I mean, I tried his Robin Hood movie, and I was like, this is just awful. Like, there's nothing distinctive about it.
I really like Anthropophagus. I know it's not paced that well, but I do enjoy the movie quite a bit.
Sorry, Art.
He's definitely right. It is paced much worse than Ollie, though.
Yeah, but like, I don't care though. It doesn't matter. Well, same with Jean Rollin. I mean, it's like his movies. I guess you would call them slow, and again, the pacing is something you have to kind of get used to. But I mean, if you're in the right mood, though, it's very hypnotic. And it just kind of lures you in. You don't realize how much it's gotten under your skin until you get to the end of the movie. Like, it really kind of gets to you, especially something like Fascination or Living Dead Girl. It's like you may not get into the groove right away, but if you just stick with it, like if you just kind of give it a chance, it really, really clings to you.
The thing is, I don't think I've ever been emotionally as impacted by anything that the other guys did as Living Dead Girl.
Yeah.
But it's kind of hard to beat Beyond the Darkness, honestly, because that's just like the perfect amount of sleaze and filth, and it's just like such an ugly, nasty movie.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just trying to think about it. Like, I did a top 50 directors on a show, and it was really hard. This was like 5-6 years ago, and I think the order probably then was from top to bottom was Joe D'Amato, Jess Franco. No, John Rollin, Jess Franco. Because Franco has a lot of lows because he's made so many movies.
Yeah,
but he has
God,
a lot of highs.
The highs are so high, though.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to probably put. I don't want to do John Rollin on the bottom.
Yeah, that's it. And again, it depends on what you expect. It's like what you're in the mood for. I mean, because if you ask me the same question a week from now, I might say something totally different. Like if I go on a Jess Franco binge, I might put him even higher, or you never know. It depends.
Yeah, but I don't know if I ever got emotional from any Joe D'Amato's or Jess Franco's movies like I do on Living Dead Girl.
I have with Franco. I would say Virgin with Living Dead actually kind of gets me. The scenes where she sees her dead father, where he's visiting her, like those are like really powerful. Like that, and the music in that really kind of hits me. We got to talk about the music in Living Dead Girl. We haven't even touched on that.
Yeah. It's very sad.
God, the music in this is amazing. This was by Philippe Durand, who was a composer that he used later in his career. But the score in this is beautiful. The way he plays out that music box idea, which is kind of the main motif in the film. But yeah, some of the music he has in this is just gorgeous. And this is one of the very first ones that ever came out on CD. Way back in the day, there was I think it was Peter Blumenstock did a music from the films of Jean Rollin's CD. And Living Dead Girl was kind of had the most on there. That and Fascination were the bulk of it. But yeah, I think this, along with probably this Fascination and Sure of the Vampires, these are probably like the three best scores he ever had. I mean, but yeah, the music in this is just great. And Philippe Durand is somebody he came back to later in his career. He did Two Orphan Vampires. He was a composer he came back to. So he obviously really liked what he brought to this film.
So I should mention, the DP is actually different from the guy who did Grapes of Death. He worked at DP. The first time he worked with this guy was on Zombie Lake, and then he worked with him afterwards multiple times. I don't know who actually did Grapes of Death, but I remember the cinematography, I think, is probably overall better at Grapes of Death, if I remember. I remember that movie was immaculately well shot is the takeaway I remember from it, at least the zoom outs and stuff. This has similar flair, but the DP was Max Montalet. It's French. French is like kryptonite among every other language besides English, but French especially so much. So
your French is probably like my Spanish.
I actually took Spanish. Spanish is not that bad for me, but French is not bad for me.
I know, but it's like, see, I'm such an idiot. Like I moved to LA and like I can do French, Italian, and German, but I can't do Spanish at all. It's like the only language I need to know in LA is Spanish. Of course, I can't speak a lick of it.
The only language I wanted to learn was Italian, but they didn't offer it, so I took Spanish, and I'm like,
Which is kind of close. I mean, they're all all of them are Romance languages, so you can sort of fake your way through it. But yeah, someone speaking Spanish to me, I'm like useless. I can make out a word here and there, but yeah, forget it.
It's way too fast. I mean, any language that you're not understanding, you're never going to be able to talk to somebody on a regular. You're just like, okay. But given the Billy Madison, slow down. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Any plugs?
Well, just on a relevant note, pretty recently, Troy and I did a commentary for Jean Rollins' Requiem for a Vampire, which is out from Indicator on UHD and Blu-ray. So snap that up if you can. Again, my website is mono-digital.com, and I wrote a book called The Fright Fest Guide to Vampire Movies, which touches on a lot of Jean Rollins films. I mentioned this as being kind of like a non-vampire vampire film, that it has elements of it, but it's not really a vampire film. So I go into that, but a lot of most all of his vampire movies are in that. So but grab that if you're a John Rollin fan. Yeah, other than that, lots of commentaries are out there, and yeah, yeah, just keep up with my website. You'll see what I've been watching lately, and wonder why I haven't gone totally insane yet.
I
Especially
appreciate you
especially
doing
after
this.
yeah, no problem. Especially after 900 Shaw Brothers movies. I don't know how I can still function, but
Um, I love the Shaw Brother movies, but I dare anyone to watch 5 or 6 Shaw Brothers in a week and then go talk about them and be able to differentiate between the storylines, because there's 2 or 3 different storylines in a period piece Shaw Brothers movie. There's only a couple different variations.
oh yeah, yeah. Those Arrow Shaw scope sets are like I've reviewed every single one of them, but man, they just drain you hard. I mean, they're fun movies, but yeah, trying to do like 12 of those like in a week and a half, it'll yeah do damage to you. Whereas you can
I,
watch like 8 genre line movies in a row and you'll be totally fine. So I think this one.
I need, what do they say? Variety is the spice of life. I always do like 2 Shaw Brother movies a week because I love them, but I can't do multiples because it's with the Shaw Brother movies, a lot of the like American character actors and stuff is second nature to me at this point. You're like, oh, that's Sterling Martin, that's this guy, this guy, he was in
Mhm.
this. But with the Shaw Brother movies, you see all these actors that you recognize, and they really
Yeah,
are that guy to you. So you're like, I think that's Gordon Liu. That's Fu Shang. That's by Chang
yeah.
Chi. That's by Chor Yun, and all the names are similar. And you're like, oh my god, this is a lot of memorization that I do not have right now. But
Yeah, my hat
they're
goes
good.
out to people who are scholars on that stuff because that's like I'll never do a commentary for a Hong Kong or a Japanese film because like I love the movies, but like I could not keep it all straight in my head. There's no way. So those who can, like, my undying admiration to you.
It's a lot to learn. It's like picking up, and I wish I would have watched them as a kid. I think I would be more vastly versed in it. But I do appreciate you doing this. Hopefully, it was a
My
good
pleasure.
time for you. And you had a lot
Absolutely.
of information. I appreciate it. Anytime you want to
Yeah,
come on for a movie, just let me know.
I'm very happy to, and thank you for picking this film. Again, this isn't when you think of 82 horror films, this isn't one that you would normally would pick out of the batch. So yeah, I think this was a great choice though, and I think once people get the chance to see it again, once it gets reissued, I think it's gonna be able to be more fans because again, I mean, out of genre Land's 3 zombie films, this is a really super special one.
I think this would do really well with a younger audience too.
Yeah, I think so. And these are really great to watch. You were talking about comparing to stuff like The Variety and Shaw Brothers, but those are like kung fu movies and stuff you can watch during the day, afternoon, morning, whatever. You can throw them on anytime. Genre land movies are like things like this you should watch late at night, like kind of when your brain is a little bit like a little foggy, a little more beaten down from the day. Like if you put it on like kind of like 10 or 11 o'clock at night and just kind of groove along with it, that's the best way to. Kind of like Franco's the same way. It's like when you're not too worried about being totally logical or rational about it or nitpicking about details. It's like, but like yeah, it's just kind of like getting in a boat, just kind of riding down that lake. Yeah, that's really the best way to do these kind of movies.
Well, like people often say, Fulci's films and Argento's films are nightmare logic. But
Hmm.
if those are nightmare logic, I don't know. I have to think of a word, but these are the next step into nightmare logic, John Rollins movies. These are actually just dream. This is a dream.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Jean Rollin. I mean, it's literally just like going on like an absinthe trip in some of his movies. It's like you're just kind of just you're out there with whatever it is that he's doing, and you just go with it. Especially when he's breaking out the psychedelic colors in some of those vampire films, or like New Vampire and stuff like that. It's like you just, who cares where the light's coming from? Who cares what the storyline is after a certain point? You just go with it. But again, if you're new to him, I think yeah, start with this one. This is a really good one. This is one of my early ones, and it's a very special one to this day. I always love coming back to it.
And to quote one of my friends, when I asked, they said you should watch this porno. It's a good one. And I said, are they good looking? And they responded, well, they're French. So
I
that means
actually
yes.
I had this discuss. There was a podcast I did a couple of years back, and there were 2 female guests on there, and they were like, yeah, I really love Jean Rollin. I can't remember which one. I think we were talking about Shiver the Vampires came up, and they were like, I love Jean Rollin, but we should do a Equal Opportunity. Like he should really get the guys naked more. And I'm like, he's done that, and trust me, you do not want these guys to get naked. I mean, look at Demoniacs when you're just like no, put the pants on. Like, no, 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 do not do this to me. Like,
Well, he meant it as a
no.
compliment because I mean, most of the people in the French movies, Cheer for the Vampire, I think, like my review when I saw that was just a joke review on Letterboxd, was average BMI of these people is 16.5 because
Yeah,
everybody's rail thin and like model in that one. But yeah, a lot of the times it's a lot of just John Roland's friends in here, like the Gravediggers or the guys in the beginning. They're just average French guys, and the women are like supermodel, amazing women, and then you're just like got your schlubby friend Bob coming down and be like, "I'm dumping the toxic waste. You want me to take my shirt off?" No, Joe, we can leave the shirt on. Not that I'm body shaming because happens to all of us.
yeah, but I'm just saying there's certain people where maybe 35 millimeter is not the greatest showcase for your body. Like, like there are definitely different levels, and like at a certain point, but like, oh, I'm so sorry to do this to you, man. But like, but but again, but he came from such a pulp background. He grew up watching serials and like reading pulp novels, and he grew up around surrealist artists and things like that. So the nudity in his films, it's very different from Franco. It's not very, even his porn, it's not that, it doesn't feel very sexploitative. There's something just very sort of sweet and innocent about it. And in this film as well, it's like even in that sex scene, it doesn't feel like it's meant to turn you on. That's not what it's there for, really. It's something, but it's very artistic. You mentioned the shot where where she's lying dead on the steps outside, where she's nude. But again, it's done like a painting. I mean, it's not
Yeah, for
it's not
sure.
something supposed to be excited at all.
It's definitely very obvious where he's like very particular on his framing and his shots,
Yeah,
and you can tell that, and that's where he definitely excels at that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's really one of a kind.
Appreciate it again. Take care.
Yeah. All right, you too.